The year was 2247, and humanity had finally reached beyond the boundaries of their small blue world, spreading across the Sol system like seeds carried by cosmic winds, building colonies on Mars and mining stations in the asteroid belt, creating a civilization that stretched from Mercury to the frozen moons of Neptune, never knowing that ancient eyes watched them from the darkness. Between stars, the galactic concord had existed for 100,000 years. An alliance of 4,000 species, united under laws written when humanity's ancestors still lived in caves. And the most sacred of these laws declared that no predator species shall ever be permitted to reach the stars. For predators brought only war and suffering and death wherever they traveled. When the Concord's long-range sensor arrays detected the flash of humanity's first faster-than-light engine test, alarms rang out across 1,000 worlds, and emergency councils gathered in crystalline halls that floated among nebulae. And the verdict came swiftly, as it always did when predators were discovered. Admiral Keth Voran of the Lyrani Dominion received his orders with grim satisfaction, for he had commanded 12 eradication fleets in his long career and never once failed in his sacred duty. And now he stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, watching as 12,000 warships assembled around him like a swarm of metallic predators, preparing to descend upon unsuspecting prey. The fleet jumped through folded space and emerged at the edge of the Sol system, where the light of humanity's young yellow sun painted their hulls in shades of gold. And Keth Voran looked upon this small civilization with something between pity and contempt, for they had no idea what was coming for them. He broadcast his message on every frequency the humans used, his translator converting his words into their primitive language. Creatures of the third planet, you have been judged by the Galactic Concord and found guilty of the crime of existence. For you are predators, and predators cannot be trusted among the stars. And so you are given this choice: surrender your technology and dismantle your ships and return to your world to remain there forever, or face complete and total cleansing from the universe. You have 72 hours to comply. On Earth, in a bunker buried 3 miles beneath the Swiss Alps, the United Terran Defense Council received the transmission in stunned silence. 12 men and women who held the fate of humanity in their hands, staring at screens that showed the impossible. Thousands of alien warships, hovering at the edge of their solar system. Director Yuki Tanaka stood at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of tactical displays. And for a long moment she said nothing as she processed what this meant for every man, woman, and child on Earth and across the colonies. How many ships do they have? She asked, her voice steady despite the weight pressing down upon her shoulders. General Marcus Webb pulled up the sensor data, and his face went pale as the numbers appeared. 12,000 confirmed warships. Director, each one larger than anything we have ever built. And our analysts believe this is merely their advance fleet. The room erupted in chaos as council members shouted over each other, some demanding immediate surrender, while others called for desperate last stands. And through it all, Director Tanaka remained silent, her mind racing through possibilities and contingencies that had been prepared for this exact moment, for humanity had always known, deep in their bones, that the universe was not a friendly place. And they had spent 3 centuries preparing for threats they prayed would never come, building weapons in secret, hiding death in the shadows of moons and inside hollowed-out asteroids, creating what they called the contingency, humanity's insurance policy against extinction. Silence, Tanaka commanded, and the room went quiet as all eyes turned to her, waiting for the words that would determine the fate of their species. She walked to the main display and pulled up a file that most of the council had never seen, classified so deeply that only 3 people in the entire human government knew of its existence. And as the data filled the screens, several council members gasped in disbelief. For 200 years, we have prepared for this day, Tanaka said, her voice hard as steel. We built weapons that would make our ancestors weep with terror. We seeded our solar system with death. We created machines designed for one purpose, and one purpose only to ensure that any species that tried to exterminate humanity would pay a price so terrible that they would wish they had never discovered us. General Webb stared at the display showing the locations of hidden weapons platforms, stealth minefields, orbital defense grids, and something called Project Erebus that made his blood run cold when he read its specifications. Director, he said slowly, if we use these weapons, if we fight back against a force this size, billions will die. Tanaka turned to face him, and in her eyes burned a fire that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and wars that had nearly destroyed them a dozen times over. General, if we surrender, if we give up our technology and our freedom, we condemn every future generation to live as prisoners on their own world. Never again to reach for the stars. Never again to dream of something greater. And I did not spend my entire life building our defenses, just to hand everything over to aliens who see us as nothing more than animals to be caged. She walked to the communications console and opened a channel to the alien fleet, aware that every human in the solar system would hear her words, aware that she was about to commit her species to a war that might end in their complete annihilation. Admiral Kethvaran, she said, pronouncing the alien name carefully. I am Director Yuki Tanaka of the United Terran Defense Council, and I speak for all of humanity when I give you our answer to your ultimatum. She paused, taking a breath, feeling the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down upon her shoulders. We decline across the Sol system. The message echoed through colony domes and space stations and ships. And for a moment, there was only silence as humanity absorbed what their leader had done. And then something extraordinary happened. They began to cheer on Mars. Miners raised their fists and roared defiance at the stars above on Luna. Families huddled together and swore they would fight to the last breath on Earth. Billions of people looked up at the night sky and felt something ancient stir in their hearts. Something that had carried them through every trial their species had ever faced. Admiral Kethvaran received the humans' response and felt a flicker of confusion. For in all his years of conducting eradications, no species had ever refused the ultimatum. They always begged and pleaded and surrendered, hoping for mercy that would never come. Foolish creatures, he muttered to his second in command. They have chosen extinction. Begin the advance. We will cleanse their system within the week. As the alien fleet began to move inward toward Earth, humanity activated the contingency, and across the solar system, weapons that had slept for centuries began to wake. And the darkness between planets filled with the cold light of humanity's answer to annihilation. The galaxy had tried to crush Earth, and Earth was about to show the galaxy exactly why that was a terrible mistake. Admiral Kethvaran stood on the command bridge of the Eternal Judgment as his fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune. 12,000 warships moving in perfect formation, like a wall of death, advancing toward the small blue world that had dared to defy the Concord. And he felt nothing but contempt for the primitive creatures who thought they could resist the might of a 100,000-year-old civilization. Status report, he commanded, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical display that showed the positions of every ship in his fleet. His sensor officer, a young Lyrani with scales that shimmered green in the bridge lights, studied her console with growing confusion. Admiral, I am detecting no enemy vessels. No defensive positions, no orbital platforms. The entire system appears to be empty. Kethvaran clicked his mandibles in amusement, for he had seen this before in other eradications. primitive species hiding in their bunkers and hoping the storm would pass them by. Not understanding that the Concorde's justice was absolute and inescapable, they are cowering in fear. He declared to his bridge crew, "They have realized the foolishness of their defiance, and now they pray to whatever gods they worship for mercy. Continue the advance. We will reach their homeworld within 3 cycles." The fleet pushed deeper into the Sol system, passing the ice giant Neptune and its strange blue moon Triton. And still the sensors showed nothing but empty space and cold silence. And some of the younger officers began to relax. Believing this would be the easiest cleansing in Concorde history, they were wrong. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Cole sat in the captain's chair of the TSS Phantom, a stealth frigate no larger than a Concorde shuttle, hidden in the shadow of an asteroid that tumbled slowly through the darkness of the outer belt. And he watched his tactical display as the enemy fleet moved past his position, completely unaware of the 50 human ships that surrounded them like wolves stalking a herd of oblivious prey. "All ships. This is Cole," he whispered into his comm. "Hold position and maintain silent running. Let them pass the trigger line, across the asteroid belt." 49 other captains acknowledged with quick bursts of encrypted data. Their ships running cold and dark, engines off, life support minimal. Crews breathing recycled air and waiting for the moment that would change the course of galactic history. The Concorde fleet crossed an invisible boundary in space, a line that human strategists had calculated years ago, and deep within 1,000 asteroids. Ancient systems that had waited decades for this moment finally received their activation signal. The mines woke up. They were not like any mines the galaxy had ever seen. Not simple explosives or energy weapons, but something far more terrible. Gravity bombs that bent the fabric of space-time itself, creating microscopic singularities that lasted for only a fraction of a second, but in that fraction of a second tore apart anything within 100 kilometers. The first wave of Concorde ships simply vanished, crushed into points of infinite density, their crews never even knowing what had killed them, and in the span of a single heartbeat, 400 warships ceased to exist. Admiral Kethvarin stumbled as his flagship shook from the shockwave of nearby detonations, and alarms screamed across his bridge as damage reports flooded in from across his fleet. "What is happening?" he roared, his scales flushing red with rage and confusion. "Mines!" "Admiral," his tactical officer screamed back. "Millions of them. They are everywhere. They were hiding in the asteroids, and we never detected them." Before Kethvarin could respond, the second wave of human weapons activated, trillions of autonomous micromines that had drifted through space like invisible dust. And now they swarmed toward Concorde ships like angry insects, latching onto hulls and detonating with enough force to punch holes through armor that was supposed to withstand anything. "Raise shields to maximum power," the Admiral commanded. But his shield officer shook her head in despair. "Admiral, the shields are not working. These weapons are not energy-based. They are physical projectiles. Our shields were never designed to stop solid matter traveling at these speeds." And then the railguns opened fire from hidden platforms scattered across the asteroid belt. Electromagnetic accelerators that stretched for kilometers hurled tungsten slugs at 12% the speed of light. And these simple metal rods carried more kinetic energy than nuclear warheads, punching through Concorde warships like needles through paper. Lieutenant Commander Cole watched his display as enemy ships died by the hundreds, explosions blooming like flowers across the darkness of space, and he felt no joy in the destruction, only grim determination to protect his home and his people. "All ships. This is Cole. Begin attack run. Target their command vessels. Show them what humanity can do." 50 stealth frigates lit their engines and burst from hiding, racing toward the scattered and confused Concorde fleet like arrows fired from a bow. and each frigate carried weapons that would have made Cole's ancestors weep with terra-suicide drone swarms launched first. Thousands of small craft piloted by simple AI programs that had only one purpose: to crash into enemy ships at maximum velocity and detonate their antimatter payloads. And the drones died eagerly, trading their existence for Concorde cruisers 10,000 times their size. Nuclear torpedoes followed. Warheads designed not to explode on impact, but to burrow deep into enemy hulls before detonating, turning warships into expanding clouds of radioactive debris. And finally, Cole ordered the deployment of the Prometheus lances. These were humanity's most terrible weapons. Concentrated gamma-ray bursts that could punch through any known material. Invisible beams of pure death that traveled at the speed of light and gave their targets no warning and no chance to evade Concorde. Ships that had survived the mines and the railguns and the drones. And the torpedoes now found themselves pierced by invisible fire that killed their crews and left their vessels drifting dead in space in 6 hours. Admiral Kethvoran lost 2,000 ships. He stood on his bridge surrounded by the screaming of alarms and the reports of catastrophic losses, and for the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. "How is this possible?" he whispered, staring at the tactical display that showed the wreckage of his fleet scattered across billions of kilometers of space. His science officer, an elder Lyrani who'd studied 1,000 civilizations, looked up from her analysis with horror in her eyes. "Admiral, their weapons are based on kinetic energy, simple mass and velocity. We have not faced such primitive technology in 50,000 years. Our shields and armor were designed to stop energy weapons, not chunks of metal moving at relativistic speeds." Kethvoran processed this information and realized with growing dread that his entire fleet was vulnerable, that all the technological superiority of the Concorde meant nothing against an enemy who fought with rocks and metal and raw physical force. "Send a message to the Concorde High Command," he ordered, his voice hollow with shock. "Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them we need every ship they can send. Tell them that these creatures fight like cornered animals, and they have no concept of acceptable losses." He paused, watching as another section of his fleet vanished under human fire. "Tell them to send everything deep in the asteroid belt." Lieutenant Commander Cole received reports of the enemy's retreat toward Mars, and he allowed himself a small, grim smile. For this was only the beginning. Humanity had revealed only a fraction of their weapons today. And if the aliens wanted to reach Earth, they would have to pay in blood for every kilometer of space between here and home. The first battle was over. The war had just begun. The Concorde High Command received Admiral Kethvoran's desperate message, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the ancient council chambers fell silent with something that felt dangerously close to fear. For no species had ever destroyed 2,000 Concorde warships in a single engagement. Not even the machine uprising of the Third Era had inflicted such losses within days. The largest fleet in galactic history began to assemble. 50,000 warships from 12 different species. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, carrier vessels that held thousands of fighters, support ships that could manufacture new weapons in the void of space. All of them converging on the Sol system with a single purpose: the complete and total extermination of humanity. But while the Concorde gathered its strength, humanity was not idle, and across the solar system, the true scope of human paranoia revealed itself in ways that would haunt alien nightmares for generations to come. General Amara Okonkwo stood in the command center of Fortress Luna, buried deep beneath the dark side of Earth's moon, watching holographic displays that showed the defensive preparations unfolding across the inner system. And she felt a fierce pride burning in her chest. as she witnessed what her species had built in secret over 2 centuries of planning for the worst. Mars transformed before her eyes as dormant volcanoes that had slept for millions of years split open to reveal continent-sized railgun batteries hidden in their depths. Weapons so massive that their recoil would have shattered any normal structure. But human engineers had built them into the very bones of the red planet itself, Phobos and Deimos. The twin moons of Mars detached from their orbits and began to move under their own power, revealing that they had been hollowed out and converted into mobile battle stations, each one carrying enough firepower to level a civilization. General, her aide reported with barely contained excitement. The Luna array is fully charged and ready for deployment. Okonkwo smiled without warmth as she authorized the activation of humanity's most ambitious defensive weapon, a particle accelerator that circled the entire dark side of the moon, capable of firing beams of antiprotons across the entire solar system. A weapon that could crack open planets if aimed with precision. Jupiter's moons had their own surprises as Europa and Ganymede and Io revealed hidden fleets of automated warships, vessels with no crew that could fight with ruthless efficiency and accept losses that would be unthinkable for any manned vessel. And these ghost fleets began their slow journey toward the inner system to reinforce humanity's defenses and Earth itself. The blue marble that aliens dismissed as a primitive backwater, Earth was the greatest fortress of all. 10,000 weapons platforms orbited the planet in overlapping defensive layers, each platform carrying enough firepower to crack a continent. And these were merely the visible defenses that the enemy would see coming. The invisible defenses were far more terrifying. Director Tanaka reviewed the status reports in her bunker and felt the weight of command pressing down upon her shoulders as she calculated the cost of the war to come. Knowing that millions would die even if humanity won, knowing that defeat meant extinction, knowing that there was no choice but to fight. The Concorde fleet will arrive in 16 days, General Webb reported, his face grave on the holographic display. 50,000 ships, Director. 4 times what they sent before. Tanaka nodded slowly. And our own forces? We have rebuilt to 3,000 combat-capable vessels, plus the automated fleets from Jupiter, plus all planetary and orbital defenses. We are as ready as we will ever be. But Tanaka knew that numbers alone would not be enough. That eventually, the Concorde would overwhelm humanity through sheer attrition. And so she made the decision that would change the nature of the war forever. Activate Project Erebus. She commanded deep in the Kuiper Belt, beyond the orbit of Pluto, in the cold darkness where sunlight was merely a distant memory. Massive structures that had waited for 20 years finally received their orders. And ancient engines roared to life as the first wave of relativistic kill vehicles began their acceleration toward distant stars. These were not conventional weapons, but something far more terrible. Simple masses of ultra-dense material accelerated to 99.9% the speed of light. Unstoppable projectiles that carried no warheads because at such speeds they needed none. For the kinetic energy alone was enough to sterilize entire star systems. First RKV reached its target 3 days later, the Concorde staging area at Proxima Centauri, where supply ships and reinforcement fleets gathered for the assault on. There was no warning. One moment the staging area existed, thousands of ships and orbital stations and supply depots, and the next moment a streak of light crossed the system at impossible speed and struck the primary station with the force of a small supernova. The explosion was visible from Earth with the naked eye. 3 star systems burned in the aftermath as the shockwave expanded outward, destroying everything in its path, and the Concorde realized with dawning horror that humanity had found a way to project extinction-level force across light years of space. Admiral Cat Form received the news of Proxima Centauri's destruction while his fleet was still in transit to Sol. And for the first time in his life, he questioned whether the Concorde had made a terrible mistake. They destroyed a staging area that was 4 light-years away, he said to his senior officers, his voice barely above a whisper. They hit it with something we could not detect and could not stop. And they did it as casually as we would swat an insect. His tactical officer displayed the analysis of the attack. Our scientists believe they used a relativistic kill vehicle, a simple mass accelerated to near light speed. The energy release was approximately equivalent to a small star going nova. And we have no defense against such a weapon? No, Admiral, at those velocities. Detection and interception are physically impossible. By the time we see it coming, it has already arrived. Kethvon felt the cold grip of fear tightening around his heart as he understood what this meant. Humanity could strike at any Concorde world at any time, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. Director Tanaka broadcast a message to the approaching Concorde fleet, her voice calm and measured despite the fury burning behind her eyes. You see now what we are capable of, she said. Proxima Centauri was a warning. Continue your attack, and we will burn every staging area, every supply depot, every homeworld that supports this war. You thought you could cleanse us from the universe, but we have the power to cleanse you right back. She paused, letting her words sink in across the void of space. You are not safe anywhere, not as long as a single human draws breath. Remember that when you decide whether to continue this war, the Concorde fleet did not slow down. 50,000 warships continued their advance toward Sol, and humanity prepared to defend their home with every weapon, every soldier, every ounce of desperate courage they possessed. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin. 8 months of war had transformed the Sol system into a graveyard of broken ships and shattered dreams, debris fields stretching across millions of kilometers. The frozen corpses of humans and aliens alike tumbling through, the void in silent testament to the price both sides had paid. The Concorde fleet that had arrived with 50,000 ships had been ground down to 18,000. Each vessel that survived carrying the scars of battle, crews that had watched their companions die in fire and vacuum, commanders who had learned to fear the small blue planet that refused to submit. Humanity's fleet had fared even worse in terms of raw numbers, from 3,000 warships at the start of the war to barely 400 still capable of fighting. But those numbers hid a truth that haunted Concorde strategists. In their darkest moments, the kill ratio was 100 to 1 in humanity's favor. For every human ship destroyed, 100 Concorde vessels died. And this was not luck or chance, but the result of centuries of preparation. Weapons designed specifically to overcome superior technology. Tactics refined through millennia of human conflict. The aliens had begun to understand something that filled them with existential dread. Humans did not build warships the way other species did not create vessels designed to survive and return home. Instead, they built extinction events with engines. Death machines meant to inflict maximum damage regardless of their own survival. Ambassador Irelthax of the diplomatic caste had studied humanity obsessively since the war began, reading their history and their literature and their psychology, trying to understand how such a young species could fight with such terrifying effectiveness. What she found kept her awake at night. She requested a secret meeting with Director Tanaka, arranging it through channels that bypassed military command on both sides. And they met aboard a neutral station in the asteroid belt. 2 women from different worlds sitting across a table in a room that smelled of recycled air and desperation. Your species is insane, Irelthax said without preamble, her translator converting her musical language into flat human words. I have studied every record of human history that exists, And all I found was war, endless war, war for resources and territory, war for religion and ideology, war for pride and revenge. You have never known peace for more than a single generation. Director. Tanaka looked at the alien ambassador with eyes that had seen too much death in recent months. That is not insanity. Ambassador, that is survival. You invented nuclear weapons and used them on yourselves, Urelthax continued, her voice rising with something that might have been fear or fascination. You developed biological agents capable of ending all life on your planet, and you kept them in storage. You created artificial intelligences and spent decades debating whether they would destroy you. What kind of species does these things? Tanaka leaned back in her chair, and for a moment she looked tired, so very tired. Carrying the weight of 8 billion lives on shoulders that had grown thin from stress and sleepless nights. Every predator on our world tried to kill us, she said softly. Every disease, every natural disaster. Ice ages that lasted millennia. Asteroids that wiped out species far larger and stronger than us. We evolved not to conquer, Ambassador, not to dominate. We evolved to endure at any cost. She met the alien's eyes with a gaze as hard as steel. You made us remember why we built these weapons. You threatened our children and our future and our right to exist. And now you are discovering what humanity does when we are cornered. Urelthax was silent for a long moment, processing the implications of what she had learned. And when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. The Concord War Council has voted to deploy the Axiom. Tanaka felt her blood run cold at those words. What is the Axiom? A stellar destabilization weapon, the ambassador replied. Unable to meet the human's eyes, it causes a star to go supernova. It has only been used once in our history, to contain a machine uprising that threatened all organic life. Deploying it means admitting that your species is an existential threat to the galaxy. The director sat in stunned silence as she absorbed this information. The aliens were going to destroy the sun itself, to burn Earth and every human colony in the solar system, to ensure that no humans survive to threaten the Concord ever again. How long do we have? The process takes 72 hours once initiated. The weapon arrived at the edge of your system 2 days ago. The Council is voting on its activation now. Tanaka stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so full of promise. And she felt something shift in her heart. A cold calculation replacing the desperate hope she had clung to since the war began. Thank you for telling me this, she said quietly. Go back to your fleet, Ambassador. Go back and watch what happens next. Urelthax hesitated at the door. What are you going to do? Tanaka turned to face her, and in that moment, the alien saw something inhuman. Eyes that she would never forget. Not rage or fear or desperation, but something far more terrifying, something that looked like patient, calculating certainty. We are going to show your Concord what extinction-level firepower really means. The Concord War Council voted to activate the Axiom, believing that destroying humanity's star was the only way to ensure the safety of the galaxy. And Concord scientists began the 72-hour process of destabilizing. But humanity had anticipated this. They had anticipated everything, deep in classified vaults that existed on no official record. A project called Lazarus had been waiting for this exact moment, humanity's answer to annihilation. Their final contingency against complete extinction, 200 Ark ships that had been built in secret over decades, each one carrying 10,000 cryogenically frozen colonists. Genetic archives containing the DNA of every species on Earth. And self-replicating factory systems capable of rebuilding human civilization from nothing. They had launched months ago, scattered to 200 different star systems across Concord space, traveling in silence and darkness. Seeds of humanity planted in the heart of enemy territory. But the Arks were not merely lifeboats, they were weapons each. ARC carried a complement of relativistic kill vehicles. Enough extinction-level firepower to sterilize every homeworld in the Concorde. And now Director Tanaka activated them all. 200 signals broadcasting across the galaxy. 200 guns pointed at 200 different species. She opened a channel to the Concorde War Council and spoke words that would echo through galactic history forever. Counselors of the Concorde, you have decided to destroy our sun. You have decided to burn our world and kill every human in the solar system. You believe this will end your war with humanity. She paused, letting the silence stretch. You are wrong. Data burst across Concorde networks as 200 confirmed signals appeared deep within their territory. Each one a beacon marking the location of a human ARC ship. Each one a promise of devastation beyond comprehension. We have already seeded ourselves across your galaxy. Tanaka continued, her voice cold as the void between stars. Each of our ARCs carries enough firepower to sterilize every homeworld in the Concorde. Every single one. Fire your weapon, and we will spend the next 10,000 years hunting your species to extinction. She let those words hang in the air. Not conquest. Counselors, extinction. We will erase you from the universe so completely that no one will ever remember you existed. That is the human way. That is what you face if you continue this war. The Concorde War Council stared at their displays in horror as they realized the trap they had walked into. Understanding at last that humanity had planned for their own destruction and prepared a response so terrible that it would end all life in the galaxy, the vote on the axiom was called again, and this time, the result was different. The Concorde War Council chamber had never been so silent in its 100,000-year history. 12,000 delegates from 4,000 species staring at holographic displays that showed 200 human ARC ships positioned throughout their territory. Each one a loaded weapon pointed at a different civilization. High Counselor Methkari of the founding species rose on trembling legs, her ancient body carrying the weight of a decision that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. And when she spoke, her voice echoed through the crystalline halls like the tolling of a funeral bell. We have made a terrible mistake, she said simply. We looked upon humanity and saw only predators, only threats. We did not see survivors. We did not understand that a species forged in endless struggle would never surrender, would never submit, would burn the entire galaxy before accepting extinction. Admiral Kethvoran, watching the proceedings from his damaged flagship, felt the shame burning in his heart as he remembered his contempt for the humans. His certainty that they would fall before Concorde might like every other species before them. What choice do we have? Another counselor demanded, his scales flushing with anger and fear. If we do not destroy them now, they will destroy us eventually. The humans have proven they cannot be trusted. They fight without honor, without limits, without mercy. A young delegate from a species that had only joined the Concorde 1,000 years ago rose to speak, with respect. Counselor, the humans have shown exactly as much mercy as we showed them. They fight the way they do because we gave them no alternative. We came to their home with 12,000 warships and demanded they abandon their future. What did we expect them to do? The debate raged for hours as the 72-hour countdown continued. The axiom weapon charging to full power at the edge of the Sol system. Humanity's fate hanging by a thread, while aliens argued about whether to commit genocide or face the consequences of their own actions. Director Tanaka waited in her bunker, surrounded by the senior members of humanity's defense council, watching the clock count down toward the moment of truth, knowing that everything now depended on the choice of beings she had never met and could not influence. Do you think they will stand down? General Webb asked, his voice rough from exhaustion and stress. Tanaka shook her head slowly. I do not know. They are not like us. Their psychology is different. Their values are different. They may choose to destroy us and accept the consequences. They may believe that eliminating humanity is worth the price of losing their own civilizations. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Cole, now promoted to Admiral after his heroic defense of the outer system, spoke up from his position at the tactical display. If they fire that weapon, how long do we have? 3 days before the sun goes supernova, Tanaka replied. 3 days to evacuate as many people as possible to the deep bunkers. Though survival there would only delay the inevitable, Cole nodded grimly. And our retaliation? Already programmed. The Arcs will launch their payloads the moment our sun destabilizes within 10 years. Every Concord homeworld will be sterilized. Silence fell across the bunker as humanity's leaders contemplated the end of everything they had ever known. The death of their world and the deaths of trillions of innocent aliens who had never asked for this war. The Concord Council floor. High Counselor Methkari called for order and demanded a final vote. Her ancient eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates with an expression that mixed sorrow with resignation. We have heard all arguments, she declared. We have debated consequences and possibilities. But in the end, the choice is simple. Do we destroy humanity and accept our own destruction in return? Or do we find another path forward? The votes came in slowly, each species weighing their survival against their pride, their fear against their wisdom, and as the count progressed, a pattern began to emerge. Species that had lost the most ships voted for destruction, their grief and rage overwhelming their reasoned. Species that had studied humanity's history voted for peace, understanding that this enemy would never stop fighting, would never forgive, would hunt them across millennia if necessary, and species that had faced extinction themselves, who remembered what it felt like to be cornered and desperate, voted overwhelmingly to stand down when the final count was announced. The Axiom weapon was deactivated by a margin of less than 1%. Admiral Cathorn received a order to cease hostilities and felt something he had never expected to feel toward the creatures he had tried to exterminate. Respect. He broadcast a message to the human fleet. By order of the Galactic Concord, all offensive operations against humanity are hereby suspended. We request a formal meeting to discuss terms of peace. Director. Tanaka received the message and allowed herself to breathe for the first time in months, tears streaming down her face as she realized that humanity would survive, that the sun would continue to shine, that children would grow up to see stars that were no longer enemies. Tell them we accept, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Tell them we are willing to talk. The negotiations took 3 years. 3 years of difficult conversations between species that had tried to destroy each other. 3 years of building trust from the ashes of war. 3 years of redefining what the Galactic Concord meant and what place humanity would have within it in the end. Humanity did not join the Concord as members. They became something else entirely. Arbiters, the treaty called them. Peacekeepers with the authority to intervene in conflicts and the firepower to enforce their judgments. The species that was too dangerous to fight and too principled to conquer. Watching over the galaxy with weapons that could end civilizations and wisdom. Hard-won through millennia of survival, the old laws were rewritten. Predator species were no longer exterminated on discovery, but studied, approached, offered a choice between integration and isolation. Given the chance that humanity had never received, and in every council chamber across the Concord, a human delegate sat with quiet authority, a reminder of what happened when the galaxy tried to crush Earth 50 years after the war ended. Ambassador Marcus Cole attended a ceremony commemorating the anniversary of peace. His hair gray now, but his eyes still sharp, still carrying the memories of battles fought and friends lost in the darkness between stars. Young delegates from dozens of species surrounded him, asking questions about the war, about humanity, about how his people had faced annihilation and emerged victorious. Cole thought about how to answer. thought about the millions who had died, the weapons that still waited in their hidden vaults, the arcs that still orbited distant stars as insurance against future betrayals. "We never wanted this war," he said finally, his voice soft but carrying across the chamber. "We only wanted to reach for the stars, to explore and discover and grow. You forced us to become what we became. You taught us that the universe was hostile and unforgiving." He paused, looking at the young faces that represented the future of the galaxy. "But we learned something else too. We learned that survival is not enough, that simply existing is not the same as living. And so we chose to use our power not for revenge, but for protection. Not for conquest, but for peace." He smiled. And in that smile was the weight of everything humanity had endured and everything they hoped to become. "Humanity does not start wars," he said, the words becoming a legend that would echo through galactic history. "But we finish them, every single time." The delegates applauded, the sound echoing through crystal halls that had once rung with calls for humanity's extinction. Outside the chamber, stars burned in the eternal darkness, and among them, scattered across 100 light years, human colonies grew and prospered. Children who would never know war playing under alien suns. Galaxy had tried to crush Earth, and Earth had answered with extinction-level firepower. But in the end, the greatest victory was not measured in ships destroyed or worlds burned. It was measured in the peace that followed, in the lives that flourished, in the future that humanity had purchased with blood and courage, and the absolute refusal to accept extinction. And that was the most human victory of all.